Alright, on the subject of Legend of Five Rings, I've always been a fan of the game. And of course it started with card gaming and then went to role-playing, for me. Now I have played just about every faction there is in Legend of Five Rings, but usually you pick a faction. And I'm going to cover a faction today that's kind of a goner, though it has had its resurfacing here and there in the Old5R lore. I have had a weird tendency to pick the weirdo clans. It's just how I do things, right? And one clan that is specifically very strange and hasn't had much of a presence in the game past the original run and the Hidden Emperor arcs. The Naga. They are the snake men of the Rokugan Empire, and they have a very particular spot in Legend of the Five Rings as being the least beloved player character option out there. Yet it's only one of two non-human options. What do you know? Let's talk about the Naga for a little bit.
I was at a game store much like this a long time ago, and lo and behold, how did I get drawn into Legend of the Five Rings was the same thing as dealing with the beginning of the Naga. And something I have to show you. You see, someone brought in these 3 cards, just like this, and they said, hey, look at this. This comes to this new game we play. And look at the aesthetics involved here. First of all, the cards are completely artisan style. Matthew Wilson art, Ron Spencer, Randy Elliott, all really good quality artists. And what we have here, we have this snake guy in armor with the snake head. He's got great aesthetic value. This Naga Shigenja really won the day because it just looks great. Plus, it ended up being a very big linchpin to the early Naga strategies. And so all in all, these cards and how they were presented to me by that one guy a long time ago in a game store in 1996 determined that 1, I would play Old5R, and 2, I would play the Naga, even if the actual starter decks for Naga were actually gone for quite some time. So this is how you start playing a card game, and it's one of the things I got to show you. Just because you start because of aesthetics doesn't mean you can't pick up a faction and then have your faction fall apart later, which is exactly what happened with me.
Now, lore-wise, the Naga are presented as being an ancient race that was asleep for quite some time, and the rising of the Shadowlands and the coming of the clan war caused them to awake from their sleep and re-enter the battlefield after thousands of years, sleeping, resting in kind of like a magical cryo-sleep. Now, the thing about the Naga, the actual tidbits of the lore aside, talking about how they were represented in the game, the Naga never had really strong power as far as cards were going. I think their strongest force value ever was something like 6 for their champion, and their chi tended to max out at 4 and stay there. They were not very impressive compared to certain other clans. That aside, we had 2 things going on with the Naga aesthetic. I'm wondering if the Naga's design was anything close to well thought out. Because you had the more creature-like guys, like I represented here by the Naga Shigenja. Then you had the humanesque ones, which were going to play a big role in the future. And a lot of people who were just picking up Old5R, because when Old5R first came out, the only cards we had for the Naga were the Shigenja, the Warlord, the Abomination. There was a Bushi card that was a follower you could attach to something. There was also a card called Confusion at Court, but that's different. The thing is that we have these 2 different looks for the Naga, and it's like, well, what's it going to be? And we were just not caring at that point, but things were going to change, and how they changed were going to mean a lot. The Naga, as they progressed, were going to be a very interesting faction to play. They had a bunch of synergy that was the main focus of their faction. They also had range attacks, and there was some attempt to be anti-Shadowlands and an attempt to do terrain manipulation, though certain cards were actually better than the Naga themselves. This is a card that actually first came out in the Anvil of Despair, and people liked it. It looks cool, it's got high force, it's a really powerful follower. But here's that original card, Confusion at Court. It does something really interesting. We have a bunch of very basic looking clan members hanging around. The Nagas are represented by a single naked woman. I don't see any clothes on her whatsoever. Nope, none. It's one of those things where it's like, so she's just a plain human with a snake tail where the bottom half should be. This kind of has also the mermaid question coming up. Where are those snaky bits? Are they presently available to see, or does the tail magically count as clothes for some reason? Early on, we didn't have to suffer too much. We had Brian Snowdy came in and saved the day. We had this Shibori here, and there's evidence that she's got armor all along her lower section. Really good art, actually, despite the fact, it's just some, green woman waving around a sword. And we're seeing these human-esque Naga during the outcome of the Shadowlands expansion. When a game starts out, everybody has their chance as a faction to make a first impression upon players. First impressions mean a lot. Like the crab, they had their first impression going strong. People loved the crab. The Scorpion had a really strong first impression. A lot of the cards were also based on samurai imagery that echoed through certain samurai movies or famous paintings or pictures from military history. And so there's a lot for players to latch onto. With the Naga, we didn't quite have so much. And then we have this weird thing where we get a specific holding that's for the Naga, and it's got two naked Naga chilling around in the underwater, pulling out some pearls. Which is funny because one of the biggest jokes to other players threw at the Naga players when the game was first coming out is, "Do you remember your clothes today? Because you can guess we're going to be headed towards some interesting ground talking about the Naga lore." Now, the Naga are not Rokugani. They're a different culture. We're going to cover that in a little bit, but that aside, they are civilized, right? I mean, they believe in, civilization, right? Well, you've got two naked Naga kicking around here underwater. Maybe they're commoners. Maybe they're just pearl bed workers, right? That's kind of cool. The Naga Bowman was actually an appreciated card over the traditional Bowman. It costs more, counts as a Naga, still makes a range 3 attack, 1 force. Naked guys. Now, really cool looking naked guys, but they're still naked guys. Now, they're doing the thing where, the snake half counts as clothing, I guess. So most people imagine it as being just, the shirtless human, and the snake part was like, oh, whatever. And you have more naked Naga. Really well drawn. I mean, Ben Peck is a great artist, but, it's a naked Naga. Holy shit, Mark Teaton, as usual, goes off of the bare end, and what do you know? We have flesh-colored naked Naga. I'm wondering if that splash is a little bit of censorship or not. Who knows? But the funny thing is, I don't really care about this thing. I mean, I played the Naga whether they were naked or not. But the funny thing is that it's an embarrassment point. It really is. And so a lot of players are looking at these going, we're not going to play some half-powered weak snakes that are relying upon Shigenja to get a force bonus when we could play something cooler like a Crab Clan or Dragon Clan Samurai. They even made cooler cards later on that still had the fully naked guy. Now, he's a badass. Radicast is not to be screwed around with. He also has the ability to destroy a creature card, which includes certain dragons, and gain force from doing so. Permanent force. So he's a good card. And completely naked. There's Aisha, the experienced version of the One Hunter. I don't see any more clothes on him. He looks great in Brian Snowdy art kicking in once again, saving the day. Then we have this Mara, the obligatory Naga clan cutie. She's knocked off her tail and is apparently shedding it, and weirdly enough has grown some underwear. None of the other costumes earlier hinted they had underwear, but I guess because she's now growing legs, she has underwear. This kind of stuff doesn't really matter to a gamer who just wants to have fun, but you can imagine in the early days of L5R, people poked fun at the Nagas, 1, low power levels, and 2, their nudity, on top of the fact that 3, they didn't belong. I mean, Aisha's got, he's cool and all, but does he really belong? He's got a samurai-like headpiece. Radicast looks like someone out of, the MMA, so don't know about that there. And he's got outright dreadlocks, really. Well, a ponytail made of them, but still. This is when you go to a game looking to play samurai, you got this, which is kind of enticing, but you got a lot of, naked guys, actually. And so if you have a choice of playing a badass, Crab Clan Berserker, or playing a bunch of naked snakes that have to rely upon each other for power, well, popularity and popular opinion is going to swing in one direction or the other. They didn't have the oomph in their own personal lore to stretch out and really grab a wide player base. And the funny thing is, the artwork kind of was consistently strange throughout the entire run. Here we have a poster for the Siege of Sleeping Mountain. The Naga and the Brotherhood ganged up with the Imperials against the Imperials and the Dragon to take on Hitomi and remove her from doing horrible things to the peoples of Rokugan. As you can tell, all these Naga are just green-skinned samurai. And if you look close enough, yes, they're naked from the waist down. They look really cool, though. I mean, this is a great poster. I'm glad I have this poster. And it represents 2 of my favorite clans, the Brotherhood and the Naga, quite well. It's also just good art. I mean, thank you, Brian Snowdy, for being an L5R artist and for making our L5R experiments just plain great. Thank you, Brian. The Way of the Naga role-playing book came along, which, by the way, text-wise, this really expands on the lore. If you really like the Naga clan, buy this book. This book is essentially Naga 101 through, 485, and will get you quite a way. The artwork, of course, was better than usual because they leaned upon Ben Peck and Chris Dornhaus to do most of the real heavy lifting there. But we have where's a good one? Good one. There's Mara looking good. You got Shibura looking really stern and decisive. The Abomination, looking pretty abominable there. I really liked how Chris Dornhaus put a lot of personality in her characters, and she didn't flake off on the Naga. She gave the Naga their due. The Naga book overall had one of those covers where it's like, you look at the cover and it's weird. It's like, white's not a Naga color. Why are two of the characters wearing white? She's got really poorly drawn hair. I mean, Walter Matthau there, Dashmar, looks really cool. He's painted pretty accurately. Aisha looks okay. He's kind of glowing from... Now, is that supposed to be Mara or something? Because that hand is glowing, and Mara is not a Shigenja. And that hand is glowing something fierce. Does she have a pearl? I don't see the pearl. Naga pearl magic was really ostentatious. See the Naga Shigenja? It's like, yeah, you are grabbing the pearl and holding out for everybody to see while it glows like thunder. Your hand doesn't glow, the thing glows. The Naga pearl magic in the lore had that kind of thing with it. So the way of the Naga, on top of having relatively non-impressive art in the card game, the front cover of the role-playing edition for the Naga wasn't too inspiring on top of that. In fact, we're going to put this one underneath the much more superior Siege of Sleepy Mountain poster. Second edition, L5R, did do the Naga a justice and gave them their own splat with the Naga Warrior School, a Naga Shigenja School, and a Naga Slayer School, which were actually a really good choice of combinations to throw at the Naga. Very, very good choices there. Though, this is also one of the rare instances where we see the Naga actually wearing clothes on top of their snake bottom. And it only came around in second edition. Funny, right? Well, funny thing is that one thing or another, the second edition player's guide actually made a really good addition to first edition because you could then add these Naga schools to the other schools in the book that I've just shown you. And all in all, it comes off really well as a collection of things you can do to play with Naga. Now, the Naga are really bad at blending into the rest of Rokugani society for the purpose of role-playing. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. I have several decks in the card game for the purpose of playing the Naga, but for intents and purposes, there were different stages. Now, the Naga first came out in the Shadowlands expansion. I remember running out in the snow, actually, to go grab it when they first released, and I was there fast enough to at least grab, the last Scorpion Clan booster for my one friend, and then there was a few Naga boosters, because people really liked the Scorpion more than a Naga. And this is actually the original box. This is one of the oldest parts of my game collection. And then, of course, I bought the Siege of Sleepy Mountain. This represents a later thing. Let me show you that. But the Naga, there's two different things that you can do with the Naga, and I have a deck that kind of shows off what the Naga are really all about. You have a stronghold that produces little Naga tokens. That's actually kind of a BS little trinket. It's nice, but it's not what you really want, because those +1 Naga tokens don't do anything for you as far as the overall strategy. You have things like Shahadet. Shahadet, when he bows, all Naga in his army gain +2 force. That's kind of a big deal if you have a big army with you. And then you got stuff like Quakar, who's got a chi value twice the number of other Naga Shigenja. So he can get that number relatively high, and then you can use a card to flip his force and chi if you need to. There's the original Radicast. There's more Mara. Anti-Shadowlands, Ramash. I did use Shigara. He was a piece of crap, but he's there. This deck was based on numbers. It had a really fat deck on the Dynasty side. The idea was just turn out as many cheap personalities as possible, and then when the Naga Shigenjas and Shahadet showed up, you would boost everybody else to great numbers by, giving them a +5 bonus from 3 Shigenja and 1 Shahadet. So there's that. Tree of the Naga. These came out in Jade Edition. This is kind of a bastard deck that represents the entire original run of the game, and this is my original deck. So also, there is no presence in this deck of the champion Quamar. I didn't need to use him. It was better to use the Shigenja, and it was better to use Shahadet and get your wins that way. So there is my actual original Naga deck and how that played out. It's a very thin deck on the Fate side, minimal requirement of like 35 cards or something like that, 35, 40, it was something like that. But this deck served me very well. And I think I was the only person to play Naga seriously in my region. I didn't really go to like tournaments, or I wasn't part of the user groups, so I didn't get a lot of that information. I was really glad to have my Siege of Sleepy Mountain box with the Naga, carrying my huge, fat Naga deck. Later on, I made this thing because I had so many spare cards from collecting. The Naga do have an emphasis on anti-Shadowlands, and you can bring things like, here's a card from Pearl. The Ashland Sandsmith gives you bonuses versus Shadowlands. I included enough events to murder Shadowlands in case my Naga were too weak to do the job. The events would do the job. And so I had pretty paltry Naga. There's a Naga girl that came out in the Scorpion Clan coup. She has to pump up the use for anti-Shadowlands ability, so it's very weak that way. But she's there. She does her job. Yeah, it's not a very powerful deck at all. This one kind of sucked. I had to baby it to get it to go anywhere whatsoever. And on the Fate deck side, you've got shit like Battlefield of Shallow Graves, Final Breath, Aijitsu Duels, because not all Shadowlands Oni have really high chi stats, Stall Until Sunrise, or some good stuff. Cremation, because the undead are not going to take us alive. Armor of Sun Tao's nice. Tombs of Jade, yes. Crystal Arrows, yes. So all kinds of anti-Shadowland stuff to play with for the Naga. Now later on, post the Celestial Edition reboot of L5R, they made more Naga cards with this arc you might call the Dark Naga. The Naga were removed from the game, essentially, when Gold Edition was released, when L5R was repurchased by AEG and was in the hands of the original creators again. They got rid of a lot of the sub-clans, including the Naga, and the Naga never really came back until they made the Dark Naga arc. Now this deck of mine is horrible. It combines a deep card pool from all editions of the game. But look, it's got freaking new stuff, old stuff. And most of them also focused on non-humans. Pay for a non-human as opposed to Naga. So this deck could actually mix with other types of non-human if necessary. But I ran it like a Naga deck because, congratulations, it's a Naga deck. So I have this deck, and the Fate deck side wasn't much to look at. It's pretty much the same thing you expect. Rallying Cries. Bishamon's Fury was nice because if I got off the first attack, I could use this and some of my spare Shigenja to just blow away guys I didn't want to deal with. The Nagabushi. This is the Quentin Hoover art for the Nagabushi. This, I wish I had more of this card. That art is beautiful. I have one play set. I love it. But yeah, this is a Quentin Hoover version of Naga Spearman. Likewise. I miss Quentin Hoover. He was a really good artist. Man. But yeah, this is just a basic deck that you would expect out of the newer Naga, mixed as I have abominably done so with older cards. Because the newer Naga by themselves weren't that strong, and the older Naga by themselves weren't that strong. So this is an entire collector set worth of trying to pick various different cards to combo together to do something special with this newer set of Naga. Speaking about the lore for just a little bit, the Naga had one last thing going against them. Legend of the Five Rings is a samurai game based on, they say it's Pan-Asian, but really it's based on samurai. And there's a lot of times where you'll find in Legend of the Five Rings something clashes. And people kind of laugh at it, or they allow it to be there or whatnot. But the Naga were not samurai. Now they had a few samurai cards in there. I think the Naga Warlord counted as one. And I do believe, but most Naga did not have the samurai trait. They were just considered normal bushi because they weren't part of Rokugani society. In fact, they were based kind of on Hindu society, and they were very Indian, Bollywood almost in flavor. Now, I gotta tell you something. When it comes to gamers, the number of gamers that are fans of Bollywood and Indian culture is extremely small compared to the massive waves of weeaboos who just love Japanese-style stuff. The love of the Japanese side of things is there. The love of Indian stuff, I mean, people aren't going to spit on it, but, you know, compared to the great hotness that is Japan, back in 1996, not being part of the samurai setting and being a completely alien culture wasn't winning them any points. So the Naga kind of were due for several retcons, and they got it. I mean, they were kind of important during the Hidden Emperor arc, which is when this event took place. They were the main show during the Dark Naga arc. Then again, they were also the villains at that point, which I think was a good twist. I am not displeased with the Naga villains, but I am generally displeased in the fact that the Naga never were ever given really good handling by the designers of L5R. They were kind of just a slap-on, we're the non-human race. Then again, there was the Ratlings, and anybody who knows anything about L5R will tell you that the Ratlings are the opposite of what the Naga were. In fact, the Ratlings kind of deserve praise by comparison. They are one of the most beloved clans that ever got removed from Legend of the Five Rings. So this is me talking about the Naga and their position in Legend of the Five Rings. Is there a way to fix Naga? I think yes. I think had they stayed with a much more animalistic, armor-covered approach to the Naga and had them be almost like savage and snake-like. I mean, they could introduce a poison element. They could have kept the synergy thing because, the Pit of Vipers is always a cool thing to go into for the enemy. And they could have taken a different route with it. Going with the foreigners from a foreign land, naked humans approach wasn't winning the Naga any points. And so the Naga are literally the red-headed stepchild of Legend of the Five Rings. For those of you guys who played the Naga, awesome. Glad to hear of it. For those of you guys who hate the Naga, that's okay. I'm okay with that too, because I'm familiar with the reasons behind it all. But as far as things are concerned, Legend of the Five Rings has one of the weirdest factions, and there was a foreign faction from the beginning, no mind you. Those cards I showed you originally came from the original set. So Legend of the Five Rings has always had this weird little nation lurking around in the background that no one really cared about, and occasionally came out of the way to play around with the storyline and do dumb stuff. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to be showing more L5R videos here in the near future about clans and the meta behind them.